All right, so I am here today with Kyle Grown. He is the co-founder and CEO of Siteful, the verified news source. Siteful provides news readers with trusted and independent resources they can deploy and quickly confirm or debunk news content in real time. Kyle and his company is working on being a part of a solution to what is a very big problem, which is getting reliable information. And I'm really excited to have you here as a guest. Just to put a little context on this, it is May 22nd today, 2020. So the world is in the in the grasp of a global pandemic right now. I think more than ever, information, reliable information is important. So when I got introduced to you and your company, I was just excited to have a conversation with you. You're actually like my first guest that I haven't talked to a lot prior to being on the show.
Okay.
So it's a little new experience for me too, but very exciting and cool to have you here. I'd like to just kind of start of like just kind of laying the foundation in terms of this of where the world is right now in information. There's information everywhere. I mean, we have more access to information than ever in human history. And I think everybody kind of knows there's a big problem going on with the way we're distributing information and to know what good information is and bad information is. So just kind of lay the foundation, like in your view of like how we got where we are. As a society, and why you felt the need to start up this company.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and this is a first for me as well.
Awesome.
And I'm excited for it. So thanks for having me. Where we are and how we got here is years from now there will be volumes of encyclopedias, if they have those anymore, written on how we got to this point. The short answer is the internet, right? We gave everybody a voice, which is what should happen, right? Everybody is entitled to have a voice. What ends up happening if we don't know what those voices are and where they come from, where the origins of those are, then the context can get taken out of context. Really, we just don't know the context, and then that's when we start getting mixed narratives. And I think what's happened is we got really big really quick, which in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but one of the side effects of that, globally speaking, with the internet, with social media, is giving everybody that outlet to communicate what they want to feel. Prior to that, people had those feelings, but there wasn't a mechanism for them to get together. They were kind of isolated, and by bringing all of those voices together, they get louder, and which is a good thing, except if those voices have malicious intent. That's when it becomes a problem. And what we've seen, and so just to clarify, we aim to fix fake news, not inconvenient news. So we look at the textbook definition of what fake news is, and that's information that's not true, that's intended to deceive or unintended to deceive, but could deceive. So satire, foreign meddling, conspiracy theories, things like that. That's
so things that are like really, I mean, those things are in the headlines every day.
Pretty often,
right now
and so what we're really not interested in doing is trying to decide who, but we do inadvertently do some of this, is saying that this news outlet is better than this news outlet. That's not really what we're trying to do. What we're really trying to tackle is say, there are people in this world, there are entities in this world that want to give you information for their own benefit, not for yours. And if that's not made clear, then that's where we start to have conflict. And that's where we're not on the same page, and that's where we're kind of at now, is that we've got a whole lot of different entities. Some of them you know who they are, some of them you don't. And they're all giving you a slightly different narrative that benefits their point of view, not your point of view. And so that's where we step in and try and clarify that.
Yeah, and I want to, I mean, there's a lot to uncover here. And one of the things you talked about, I think is this really important aspect of this is I mean, there's the aspect of communication that's going on here, and I think one of the things with the internet that we're human beings, we're a species that is communicating, and communication is a very important part, and we're a species of connection. And with the internet, there was just this breakthrough of a way to communicate in a way that, like you said, all voices can be heard, and distributed information. I think one of the things that are important to understand about the media as well is the media transmits information. The media is a for-profit organization. I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting about this is, communication is a two-way street. Mm-hmm. And I hear a lot of people complain about the media, and I think there's a lot of things to complain about when it comes there. The other side of the equation is the people who are taking the media, which is all of us.
Yep.
And I often wonder how it is that we as individuals can be better, let's say, citizens in terms of that communication back and forth as well. And I think reliable information is one of those ways.
Yeah.
I mean, does that make sense to you? Is there more that you would expand upon that?
It is definitely a two-way street. What has really changed in that regard is there hasn't always been a responsibility from people that are consuming news to do anything with it.
Right.
And I think that's where the internet has really changed that interaction, is that now, whereas prior to the internet, I had the ability to consume news, but didn't have to do anything with it other than maybe make my own choices. Now I can share it myself.
Right.
And so if I'm someone of influence, that carries weight.
Right.
And regardless of what I know about this information that I'm sharing, and so if somebody trusts my opinion on something else and I'm sharing this information, then they might trust my opinion, whether or not I know anything about this thing that I'm sharing. So it's a wrinkle in the fabric. It's something that we have to contend with because we have to understand how those relationships take place. Right. But it's not something that we would ever want to stop, right? Like that is part of what makes us human. And can you imagine having a pandemic like we're experiencing today in 1985 without the internet?
Right.
We'd be so much worse off, right? Because we...
Well, what do you think we would be worse off? I sometimes wonder that.
I think we would, because we in 1985, just anecdotally, we didn't have the means to electronically interact with each other.
Right.
And so taking away that face-to-face or in-person interaction would be, I think, even far more detrimental at that point. Especially considering how Western society is structured.
Yeah. So how are you guys going about this, first of all? Because it's a huge problem that you're tackling. I think, and again, there's such a need for this.
Yeah.
But how do you do this? How do you do this then? I mean, because there's been other organizations that have attempted this. Or continue to attempt this. So
it's a huge problem, and it's so big, we have to have an idea of how this is solved on a global scale, right? Like how do you verify every bit of information? That's the problem that we're left having to think about. Because if you can't answer that, then you probably can't scale it down to a point where it's doable. We have ideas. We don't necessarily have answers, right? Like as we build, as we grow, as we learn, those answers become more concrete. What we do now is, I'll also throw in a little disclaimer. So our current website, which is Citefull.com, CITEFULL.com, it is a very basic scraping mechanism. So you can actually put in a URL. It will go and extract pieces of content from that article and try to grade them. It works. It works.
Right.
We are getting ready to release our next version within a couple weeks.
I mean, you guys are pretty much in the beta stage of what you guys are
very
doing.
Early. We're very early. The updated algorithm is by an order of magnitude more robust and can do much more things. So I'll kind of talk to that level because it is more applicable to the discussion. Yeah. What we're really doing is looking at the provenance of news and where it comes from, like who is responsible for it. So as I mentioned earlier, everybody has a voice. If you don't know what the context or what the origin of that voice is, then it's harder to discern what truth is, right? So by looking at the origin of information, so it came from this news outlet, this author, They both have a reputation for meeting journalistic standards. And then we look at the article itself and make sure it meets journalistic standards. And we just give it a grade.
Right.
And so all the news that comes through is graded 1 to 100. That's not a percentage grade. It's not like a midterm test grade. It's just more of an index against a standard. And so over time, the hope is that by meeting those standards consistently, we have individuals and entities that consistently meet those standards and they get elevated to the top. They're the most trustworthy because they meet those standards over time. What we are very successful at with that process, because we look at upwards of about 50 different elements. And some of them are time-based. How old is an entity? So if a website was created 3 weeks ago and their social media accounts were created 2 weeks ago, we can see that, and that calls into question the validity of that source.
Right.
And then we also look at the metadata around that URL. So if the intention there is if something is coming out of Russia, something is coming out of Ukraine, something is coming out of China, and it's intended to deceive, we can pick that up with a very high confidence rate almost immediately.
How much, I hear about that stuff all the time. I mean, how much of that is really going on? I mean, is it just, are we being flooded with it?
It's significant, but the math is tricky. So a lot of that stuff is created for a few weeks to share a thing, and then it just kind of disappears, just kind of evaporates, which is actually good news to us because we're built to identify those types of things. If you were to game our system, it would take you upwards of a year to really game the system so that you could flood it with misinformation. But because we also look at what you're producing after the fact. So if you produce something 3 weeks ago and then it comes back and it goes, that wasn't accurate, that dings you. So you would have to become a legitimate news organization with the intention of someday creating fake news or distributing it. To answer your question more directly, what we have found is that of the top 100 news organizations in the world, you've heard of all of them. If I was to take all of the most popular news organizations, even internationally, it'd probably be a couple hundred. To put that in context, Google recognizes over 50,000 news sources as domains. So considering that the top ones that are really legit only take up a couple hundred, again, most of those domains, they evaporate after a few weeks because they've done their deal and they kind of go away. So to that effect, it's a significant problem. Most people would experience this, and you could test this out for yourself. If you go onto your Facebook page and just look at the news, look at the URLs that people on your Facebook page are posting, you'll find a lot of them, maybe most, depending on what kind of circles you roll in, a lot of those URLs, those domains, are probably not the ones that you recognize. They're not the Fox Newses, the CNNs, the Breitbarts, or you've probably never heard of them. And that they might be legitimate news. But if you're having to ask yourself that question and having to do that research to say, is this from a Russian news factory or is this really legitimate news? That can take a lot of time. I do it for a living. And I know what I'm looking for, and I've built systems to make it easy, and it still takes me 15 to 30 minutes to find the data points that I need to say that this is a legitimate news source. If you don't have those tools and you're having to do that on your own, good luck.
And it's hours. How much of your process right now is man-driven, like literally people-driven, versus the algorithms that you're using?
Very little of it is people-driven, and it actually brings up a good point. So most of the news that you come across, whether it be a news website, a news aggregator, Facebook, you name it, is curated in one of two ways. One is editorial. Somebody's made the choice to cover the news and write something and put it out there. And the other is algorithmic, right? So there's a computer that's looking at clicks. They're looking at, preferences. They're looking at all these different variables to say, hey, this is something that you like. That second one is a problem because it tends to feed you things that that they think you like. So you get stuck in a downward spiral.
It's the echo chamber
Yep,
effect,
exactly.
That people end up in their groups, these end up in these groups, and this is one of the reasons where you see more and more of seems like more and more divide every day.
It does, and there's been a lot of studies on this, and It actually is the case that if you're like left leaning, the news that those algorithms will feed you will be continuously left and right. To within a few months, you're all of a sudden extreme right or extreme left because it's just, circle those off.
I see it myself when I'll go down different directions and I can see how.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just if you just watch what you do when you go over a different direction, or just go in a different direction than you've been going with your news, it's interesting how all of a sudden you end up in a different world. And really, you can almost, I feel like I can see it if I don't watch the news on TV much, and I think a lot of people don't anymore. But it's, you go to CNN, you go to Fox, and you're literally in, it seems like two different worlds, you're two different countries that you're living in right now.
Yeah. So what we do is we have a different approach to that, and it's based on the scoring, right? So it's important to mention that everything, Fox, CNN, every site of every respect, every outlet, every author that we look at goes through the same calculation process. They're held to the same standard. So if one succeeds and one doesn't, there's an opportunity for those ones that don't succeed to get better. And there's also an opportunity for the ones that do well to fail and get worse, right? It's a constant flux. And there's not a whole lot of human interaction that goes into that. Our current scraping mechanism, I do try to curate it because the scoring isn't, that scraping mechanism isn't as reliable as we would like, and we do try to just have eyes on it. But it's still automated. The upcoming version that we're loading in a few weeks is 99.9% automated. The 0.1% is that we have identified certain areas where it just gets flagged. Like, hey, I think it's this, and we have to dig deeper to answer the question, because what we don't want to do is, this is a legitimate news outlet that just got started by the guy that left the New York Times. But because he doesn't have these elements, he's just not ranking very well. We just want to have eyes on that stuff. He doesn't get a new calculation. It doesn't change the score. It doesn't change anything. But we can then add commentary to that and an explanation as to why this is graded that way.
So much of news, and it seems like in any outlet, is full of you got your objective truths that you're looking at, and then you have your editorialized, kind of subjective slants, which is, I don't know if that doesn't exist. I mean, in any news. Do you guys navigate that some way? Is there a way that you're putting a little context on that?
Yeah, so it's a great point. If you watch news, you'll get a lot more editorial. You'll get a lot more opinion because you get better sound bites. It's more of a product.
It's clearly what we're drawn to. Right. So
exactly.
I mean, they're feeding us what we want.
So in digital print, which is really where we're focused on at this point, there's some of that, but it's less. And so what we do is we just highlight that it's an opinion, and it gets labeled that this is an opinion piece, because a lot of opinion is written in a way that's very matter of fact, because it sells better that way. And if you know it's an opinion, it can kind of maybe change your perception of it. So we brand it, and then we don't do this yet. What we will do with that, and we already have kind of built out the infrastructure for it, it's just not ready to go live. We can identify that you yourself are a chiropractic expert, right? And so if you have an opinion on something chiropractic, that actually gets weighted higher because you are an expert. We call that an authority figure. You're an authority figure on that topic. Whereas if you were to comment on, say, jet engine design, you would actually get ranked lower because we don't recognize you as an authority in that field, right? So there's a way that no, it's not all or nothing. It's 50 shades of gray, because we are looking at your level of expertise and applying it towards the journalistic expectation of the article. So if you wrote a great article, it's going to naturally rank higher, regardless of that authority. It just kind of influences it from that deviation. So
what are these report cards? Sorry, I know that's not what it is. I mean, what are they looking like? Is it like a 5-minute read? I mean, you just plug the URL in there.
So the algorithm that sets it up is, I counted it the other day, it was 360,000 cells of calculation. So not even I can go through it.
Yes.
You
seem pretty smart, but that's a lot.
Shucks. What it looks like to a person is a couple of bar graphs, right? So 7, I think it is, and we take those 50 elements and we break them down into categories, and then give them like this one is 96, and we give them a bar graph for 96, and this one is 50, right? So you can kind of see where they met the mark and where they didn't. Okay. Most legitimate news sites meet all of them. I would say national news are going to be 92 and above, pretty much across the board. Local news is a little bit less because they have less content and less clicks on their website, so it's 89 and above. Once we get into like known fake news, 30s and 40s is kind of what it is, and so our threshold for like legitimate news is 70. Anything above 70 is still pretty good,
right?
And anything below 40 is like, I get it out. I will say some of our stuff actually does come back negative, where they've met no criteria, and it literally comes back 0. It'll default to 0 in that circumstance. So the huge challenge for the reader and a challenge for us is, how do we explain all of this math that we've done in a way that makes it really easy to digest? Right. Because if you don't understand what that score means or how we got there, it's just another data point. It's just more noise to a noisy environment, right? So making it clear and making it agreeable, and what I mean when I say that is objective, right? None of this is like, oh, well, these guys are over here, or these guys. That doesn't happen. It's all based on math. It's all based on numbers, based on their own performance. Then we hope that people will look at that and go, okay, I get it. Right. Like, we want them to question it a few times and really understand what we're about, and then we hope that they, okay, I get it, and then it just becomes another trust mechanism, like JD Power Associates or Rotten Tomatoes or something.
How are you guys planning to navigate like the political spectrum of this all? In that meaning that, a lot of the news, I mean, we're in an election year right now. And so you got your very, we're in this time of, it seems like the political divide's bigger than ever. And I mean, how are you looking to navigate that? I mean, people will just claim biases sometimes based on their own confirmation biases and their own thoughts there.
So bias is a really interesting one. And hopefully you've noticed I haven't used that word. It's not something we measure. Right. There are other companies that's their sole focus. And I would understand why they would do that. So we talk to people a lot. In fact, anybody that's listening to this, please go to our website, hit the contact us if you want to talk to us. It goes straight to my cell phone.
And I'll be sure to leave a link when we upload this.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
it goes straight to me, and I will contact you. I will, you'll talk to me. You're not going to talk to somebody in some foreign land. You're not going to talk to a bot. You'll talk to me. And that's what I want. Even people that disagree with this whole thing, please contact me. I want to talk to you about it, because we want to make sure that it's right. What we have found when it comes to bias, because it is the number one thing that comes up. But it's still only about 30 or 40% of people that bring it up when we talk to them. And so we've done some studies and we've looked into it. And what we found is that the people that are most concerned with bias in news are they themselves the most biased towards news. And so what we found in some of the other products that do this is that it becomes a confirmation tool. Does this outlet tell me what I want to hear? If it does, I'll read it, and now it's true. If it doesn't, it's fake. I'm disregarding it.
Can I get a distinction? They're concerned about bias because they feel what's not related to what their own bias is.
Yeah, it becomes in fact,
is problematic. So I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, right? Like their own bias is telling them everything else must be BS.
I'm assuming so.
Yes.
I haven't had so I came across this study in Harvard Business Review, and that's a legitimate organization that we trust. So we look at their information, and it talked about this very point. And unfortunately, I didn't get to talk to the people that they interviewed, so I wouldn't go as far as to try to analyze what they're actually thinking. But when they tested them, people that were more biased in their decision making, when given something of bias, that bias influenced the entity's bias, influenced the person's bias to be more biased, right? So it just compounded. So we specifically don't touch bias. We just look at those objective measures, and we hold everybody the same standard. If that's not good enough for you, I don't know what else to do.
Right.
There are people that believe the world is flat.
Yes.
I'm so sorry if anybody's listening to this and they believe the world's flat and they think I'm insulting them. I'm
Right.
just questioning your logic on that.
Right.
And so the reason I use that as an example is that given a mountain of evidence to say the world isn't flat, they're still willing, for whatever reason, to look past that mountain of evidence and say, no, this is what I believe. I don't know how to fix that.
Right.
So the best that we can do is say, I didn't come up with any of this math. Like I didn't create any of these numbers.
Right.
I literally punched them into a spreadsheet and calculated it 360,000 different ways, so that they all, come up with a score.
Right.
A good example of that, because I'm listening to myself talk and it sounds a little opaque, is CNN and Fox, right? Those are the two big ones that everybody kind of weighs against each other.
Right.
Based on our algorithm, Fox is 94 and CNN is 96. It's not because we like CNN better than Fox. So CNN and Fox meet all of the same criteria.
Right. How much of a difference is that really, though? When you say 94, 96, I mean, is
almost nothing.
Almost
nothing. The only there's two lines in our whole calculation that they differ, and it is so part of our methodology comes from Google's PageRank algorithm. If you're familiar with SEO stuff from way back when, so we look at linking backlinks, linking domains. CNN has 3 times the number of linking domains as Fox, and 28 times the number of inbound links as Fox. And so those two variables, with a huge disparity, there's a huge difference in those two numbers, only equates to a 2%, it's not a percent, a 2-point difference in that score.
Is it good or bad to have more links?
The more links, the better.
Okay.
So what a link really is saying to us, and the reason that we value it, is some other website, not CNN or Fox, has to put a link to CNN or Fox on their website. And that becomes a vote of confidence, right? That this is valuable.
Right.
And
it's almost like another scientist citing another scientist.
Right. It's a proxy for that. Right. And so when you consider that, there's 3 times more industry sites that have linked to CNN than Fox, and they've done it 28 times more frequently, that's an indicator to us that there's more value from the industry, not from us, but from the industry, in what CNN says versus what Fox says, regardless of anything else. So that disparity, which is the only disparity that we can find between the two outlets, only accounts for a 2-point difference in their scores. So when it comes to bias, it's not something that we have to really deal with, which is good. It's good for it's good for everybody.
Absolutely. No, it's just interesting, and I mean, I just think about so much of what people's news are, and especially going to be this year is related to politics. Yeah. And clearly, you guys are going to, have political. Articles or whatever that you're assessing, but that's not based on any of the. I mean, the attempt is to take the biases out of your rank with that.
Yeah, so. It is interesting to me because in some of the conversations, for example, Snopes, which does fact checking, it's also worth mentioning we're not fact checking this stuff. It's really important for us to do it in real time, because news is very perishable. Yeah. By the time I could never fact check everything, right? That becomes impossible. And by the time I'm done doing fact checking, the news could be weeks old and no longer relevant, right? So it's really important for us to be able to do it in real time. As far as how it impacts the election and how it impacts people's viewpoints in terms of those biases, it is a strange thing to me because a couple of years ago, Snopes got labeled as a liberal fact-checking thing. And I've heard people say, well, they're liberal. I don't, as if it's now completely nullified their argument. They may be liberal, they may be conservative. I've never really it never really mattered to me. But I don't know why that impacts whatever they like. So it is this bias is a really strange thing.
Well, it's a way, I mean, there are some people, and probably a lot of people, who are just going to look to dismiss what they don't want to hear.
Right.
Anyway, I mean, that's
and so that's
that's part of the problem. Maybe it's not part of the solution that you necessarily have.
So if that's part of a solution, hypothetically, the only solution for that person is to tell them that they're right.
Right.
And that a couple of weeks ago, I really had like a coming to Jesus kind of moment. In Crystal, my co-founder, is going to be like, "Don't talk about it." So there's this.
Well, don't worry, I don't have that many viewers yet. So
we'll just clip this part out. We'll just edit this part out of it. So there's this notion in theology that you can be right, I can be wrong, I can be right, you can be wrong. We can both be wrong, but we both can't be right. Right? So up, down, left, right. They're not both up. Right. So what that means is there are circumstances where I'm going to have to tell somebody they're wrong. Right? Hopefully that doesn't happen a lot. That's a really dangerous thing for a startup because as a startup, you want to take care of everybody, right?
You guys are going to take the stance that the Earth is round.
Yes, right. It is, yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And so I'm now telling people that believe that the Earth is flat, you're wrong, based on all the evidence that we can compile. We've compiled your evidence, what you've pointed us to, and we've compiled all the rest of the evidence. All of it points to this, and you're wrong. And having to navigate that minefield of like what happens when you have to tell somebody they're wrong in the face of evidence. So it's not my opinion's better than yours. That will never be said. We will never tell anybody that we think you're based on the data, based on the evidence. This is what we're saying is accurate. And if you're arguing with that, please do.
So let me ask you a question. I want to tie this into algorithms because this is my not being a mathematician and in any way. Isn't that kind of what algorithms are doing, though? They're taking probabilities and they're telling so for me, when it comes to the Earth being round, I believe the Earth is round. That's not because I've actually ever been up in space and seen that the Earth is round. My brain, and I know that, like it could be a fact that I'm totally wrong and this is all hallucination and we're all being duped and the Earth is flat. I think there's a extremely low probability. Whatever math algorithms I do on my own, if this is my understanding, this is my kind of dummy understanding of algorithms. That's my brain's algorithmic way of determining that I'm choosing to believe.
Kind of.
Okay. So maybe explain to me like how algorithms work in that way and how it ties into maybe our own thinking.
Okay.
Or how maybe it could tie into our own thinking because algorithms are determining this. So
so for us, the algorithm is a math problem. It's a whole bunch of cells in a database that they just do math, and we come up with various calculations, and then they get calculated out to the end with a score. That's convenient for us because we're dealing with math. We've got a numerical representation of everything. In that spreadsheet, it comes out with a number. Algebra would allow you to do it with other things, right? But the way our brains work is a little different, right? We're programmed for all sorts of different things, just evolutionarily speaking. And so part of why we are in this predicament where we're having to question what's real and what's not anyway is that a lot of us haven't been taught that. If you look at caveman behavior, it was fight or flight, it was good, bad, it was how do I keep myself safe? And ultimately that's what we all want, right? Every single person that's listening to this, every single person that will ever be a customer of ours, and everyone else just wants to be safe, secure, comfortable. That's what we're all hunting for. The problem is we all have a different idea of how to get there. And it becomes really problematic when it becomes a zero-sum game, that my comfort is contingent on your discomfort or vice versa. And there are people in the world that want you to think that. So our goal is to highlight those people and say, this is not true, and there's a malicious intent. That would be a perfect outcome for us to say, these are the people that want to harm you because of this. And make up your own mind, because we all want those same things. So our brain processes that information a little bit differently than a spreadsheet does, because we're functioning, from our croc brain or reptilian brain that just goes straight for comfort, which is why we have confirmation bias, because some information makes us feel good.
Right.
Some doesn't. Some, I can't go on Facebook anymore because everybody's shouting and screaming at everybody else, and it keeps me up at night. And I'm like, I've deleted Facebook from my phone because I'm like, I can't do it. Like, if I go on Facebook, I have to do it from my desktop, which is only during the day and it's only for specific things. But I can't go to bed being on Facebook because I just can't handle that conflict.
Yeah.
And again, it's no one's right or wrong in that circumstance. They're just trying to protect themselves. They're trying to, find safety, security, and comfort, and they're just trying to figure out how to do it the best they can.
Yeah, 100%, and that's like very well spoken. I think it's just, and thank you for explaining that, because I think it's so important. Again, on the other side of the equation is that we have this better understanding of ourselves and how we're reacting and navigating, and the way that we're wired. It makes me think, I know we were talking right before we came on, and you have children, I have children. And one of the things I think as a parent all the time is, this brave new world that we're in.
Yeah.
How am I teaching my children to navigate it?
Yeah.
And really part of that is, how am I teaching myself to navigate it?
Yeah.
How, you're thinking about this stuff. You have a bigger range of, I have a 9 and 11-year-old. You have like an 18-year-old. I think your youngest is 2-year-old. Uh-huh. So how are you teaching them to navigate this world?
Yeah, so for me personally, I really try to, and they're all girls, by the way, so I have all daughters.
Okay.
And I try to engage.
Good luck with that.
I love it. They're absolutely fantastic.
I don't blame you. That's awesome. I love girls.
And so I try to walk through everything with them. My oldest daughter is very politically woke.
Okay.
And we don't actually have the same ideology. And so it's never a matter of you're right, I'm wrong. That's never the conversation we have. It's why do you feel that, and let's dig into it. Yeah. Let's really see what the benefits are, and not just the benefits for you, which is I think where we kind of default, like, well, this is how it benefits me, but how does it benefit the greater good and everybody else, right? So luckily not everything falls into those camps, but there are times where it's like, well, if you have this, then somebody else can't, right? And so it's just talking about the implications of all those choices, so that someday when I'm not there and she's in a ballot box and she's making a choice, that she can think about all of the different things and come up with the best answer for herself. Yeah. And so that's how I speak to them personally. It's really interesting because none of my daughters will have a fundamental understanding of how news works, or how information works, because they have grown up with the internet, and they have most likely gotten their news from people that know nothing of the news, whether it be YouTube influencers, friends in Facebook, members of their congregation that aren't, and if you go back pre-internet, we had Dan Rather, Walter Cronkite, these lifelong journalists. Every night they read the news, and they didn't do it with bias. They didn't do it with motivation. They read you the news, and then they signed off, and that was it. And you, as a person, you had to consume that and figure out what to do with it. And if you look at the political landscape from 30 years ago, we were much more aligned across the board. Now, politically speaking, every single issue is a political issue. That wasn't always the case. We have now politicized everything. And so one of our early adoption kind of go-to-market strategies is what we call it, but sounds a little cold saying it that way, is for college students. So if you imagine every 18-year-old in the country that's going to college hasn't had that fundamental understanding, and yet they're voting, right? We're now going to ask them to vote in an election, and they've never experienced, I speak generally, how news should look. And so we are working on tools specifically for that purpose, because parents will spend a lot of money to protect their kids. I will spend a lot of money to protect my kids, but I don't necessarily know how to do that with fake news, right? So we're actually working on tools that where the parents can curate information automatically. They don't have to sit there, every day go find
Right.
a whole bunch of news, right? That's the benefit of our scoring system, is that we can ask them what is important to you and to what level, to what degree, right? So we can look for these topics, which we've, segmented those, and then we've used our scoring mechanism to say, okay, your kids will be fed news
Right.
from these outlets that rank this and above, and the parents can actually set those those parameters, and then the kid just gets their news from their parents in a way that everybody knows what is going on, right? And so that there's less ambiguity to what your kids are taking in, so that again it's all about community and free speech, but also having a sense of consensus through that community.
Yeah. I know, I think with my kids all the time, I always think, like, my philosophy on it is, my job as a parent is I want to teach my kids how to think about things. I think as parents, we have to be very well aware that this is, like you said, it's just a different world that they're experiencing. I always have a strong belief, like, you never go back to anything anyway, so there's no going back to the world that you and I are familiar with. And they just, and I even think as parents, it's hard for us we imagine we know what their world is like. I think we have no clue what their world is like in terms of what they're growing up. It's so completely different. It's so completely different. And so I think it's so important right now. I think, again, being able for them to have the tools like yours, to be able to navigate what's real, what's not real. But then, teaching them how to just critically think about these situations. Even now, I have my 9-year-old and 11-year-old, I'm not with them 98% of the time. I mean, no parent is. And they are being bombarded with things that I couldn't even imagine as a 9-year-old or 11-year-old. Having access to. I mean, it actually scares me when I think about how I was when I was 11 and having access to all the different things that they have access to. And it's the same challenge for us as adults. We have to learn how to critically think about this. And I think also, like, this ability to communicate with each other and have meaningful conversations. I'm with you on the whole Facebook thing. I mean, I'm on Facebook, and there's things that are necessary for me as a business person, and there's things I like about that. I like communicate. I like connection. I mean, there's things these are all gifts, and they're great things. We're just as a species, learning how to navigate all these things and learning how to navigate these tools. And I just wonder, and I just hope, and I don't know if you got, I don't know if you're partnering with people or whatever. I just hope we're also, as a culture and a society, looking to how to get ourselves to start thinking about these things and having conversations differently. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to start doing podcast format is, one thing I've definitely learned is social media is like the worst place in the world to have a political conversation. I mean, even when every now and then I posted something this week that was like, and I kind of knew when I was posting it, I'm going to regret this, and I did, because it sent other people, not myself, and I just chose not to respond to it. But it's like a lesson to me, like, it just, like, we have to be able to learn how to have these conversations. I like talking to people who have a different opinion,
of course,
than me.
I really enjoy it, actually.
And I think we have to learn how to embrace that, and embrace having these conversations. Because to me, if I'm talking to somebody who has a different opinion than me, that's like an opportunity for me to grow and develop more.
You're spot on. I really enjoy social media because I love my friends and family, and I especially now, I don't get to hang out with them. I'm not partying, but being able to see what's going on with their kids and their vacations and their lives and their businesses, like, that's really valuable to me. That's how I connect to people, and I think that is one of the brilliant things about social media, is it allows you to connect to people. I just had a conversation this week with a friend that I haven't seen in 10 years. He wanted to talk about Sitefull, and we had a great conversation. But it was like we were old friends, because I see him every week on Facebook, and I know he's got kids, and I know his wife, and he sees my stuff, so we feel connected through that medium. So it's really valuable in that. But now we're in a circumstance where we can't have our voice, right? It's given us a voice, but we can't have it because it's going to start conflict.
Right.
And that's now the problem. We've gone so far with social media that's now the problem with social media, is that there's too much conflict, because when we speak our voice, because we're all in the best intentions, right? We all have the same intentions. We want to find security, safety, and comfort, and we're just trying to find how to get there. The thing that I think about when I'm trying to create a technological solution to this problem is that there is a right answer somewhere. Right? Like we've got two opposing viewpoints, and we can put them together and say, okay, this is with data, with numbers, and say this is what's, within this degree of confidence, this is the answer. And I think everybody wants to get there, but nobody trusts the mechanism to get there. And that's our biggest problem, is does our mechanism get us to that point? If it does, then we can all be on the same page, and we will all be better for it. But again, like I mentioned earlier, that includes, that's a very altruistic kind of thought idea, right? But to get there is, you're gonna break some eggs along the way,
right?
And hopefully it's not many. And also, to clarify, I'm not speaking about personal truths. I'm not speaking about I believe in Jesus or Buddha. That doesn't play into anything that we do.
Right.
We've actually classified those kinds of facts as personal truths. So there's kind of three.
Yeah. What all do you put in that category?
Yeah. So personal truths are anything that you hold personally, and it's religious views, sometimes political views. It's usually how you feel about things.
Right.
Like whenever you hear someone say, "I feel this way," that's a personal truth that they're conveying.
Right.
And doesn't matter what I want to do with that.
Right.
I can't argue with that, right? If you believe that Jesus is your savior, or you believe in Buddha, or you believe in whatever it is,
Zeus or whoever it might be. Right.
Cool.
Right. Yes.
You are 100% entitled to that, and I would never try to take that away from anybody. Right. The same with if I feel mad about this, you are entirely entitled to feel mad about whatever that circumstance is. The other is a subjective truth. Subjective is kind of an interesting one. It's typically used in court of law. Mm-hmm. This is a weird one, so stay with me for a minute. Okay. I'll give you an example. So this guy is out walking his dog. He happens to be carrying a weapon. He rounds the corner. He sees a girl on the ground and a guy standing above him holding a gun at the girl that's on the ground. He removes his weapon and shoots the guy. This is a true story. And woman's freaking out. She's okay, but he just killed somebody.
Yeah.
Cops show up, everything. So the subjective truth from this guy is, I round the corner, I see a guy pointing a gun at a girl on the ground. I'm going to protect her, right? That's the subjective truth. Right. The objective truth, when you take away that lens, that point of view, what actually happened, what's the bigger picture? The guy standing over the girl with the gun was a police officer, off duty. The girl was an ex-girlfriend who had a restraining order, who had violated the restraining order, and was on the ground trying to get the pistol from his boot. He was an off-duty police officer.
Jeez.
She knew he had a pistol.
This is a true story.
It was a true story. So she's on the ground trying to get the pistol. He wrestles the pistol away from her, has no intention of shooting her. The guy walks around the corner, shoots him. He's dead. So the objective truth is way more nuanced. There's a whole bunch of stuff here going on that the guy that walked around the corner could never have known. Right? He never could have come to that conclusion. Yes. But because...
And almost justifiable in his actions,
absolutely.
Given what his framework of the situation was.
He didn't go to jail. It was not... he was in compliance.
Imagine that guy, what he's feeling after doing
right?
that. Yeah.
But that's the subjective, so that's the point of view truth. The objective truth is the bigger thing. It's all the pieces molded together.
Right.
So personal truth is the guy is a Jehovah's Witness.
Right.
Doesn't actually matter, right, in that context.
Right.
The personal truth is what he's seeing in this frame. That's his point of view. And then the objective truth is everything in the whole circumstance. And so by trying to take all the pieces in the objective truth and putting them together, we can take those subjective truths that are kind of like pieces of it, if you want to think of it that, and that's where we start to bring them together and say, like, okay, you're all right a little bit, but let's marry the whole thing together into a bigger picture and then use data to
Right.
Here's the thing.
Right.
And so that's
Are you guys helping break up for people? Because I think a lot of people get confused subjective and objective anyway.
Right. We talk about it.
Right.
But it's
maybe
not,
to come. Like
maybe.
yeah.
So there's some interesting things that we can do with AI. We're starting to play with AI. The problem with AI is it's biased in of itself, and it's biased based on your data set. So we handle that very delicately. The only thing that will
is that something that just like improves over time with AI? I mean, is that
it can. So we call it feeding the dragon, and the only thing that
the dragon being the AI.
The AI,
okay.
yeah. And the only thing that we'll ever use it for is just busy work. It becomes the worker bee. Like go fill in these forms, right? Like I said, we've got hundreds of thousands of cells, and we need them filled out. We can tell AI to go find those data points and fill them in. So there's not an objective, or there's not a subjective influence that the AI has.
Right.
Where AI gets in, so I know your future lens,
Yeah.
and so where AI is biased and has problems, and where we're cognizant of it and try to stay away from it is, for example, like approving students for college, either admissions or student loans. Well, there's a much higher probability that students are white, especially successful students. So AI knows that, and then has a negative bias towards people of color because they're not white.
Right.
Has nothing to do with anything else, but it takes that into consideration, and then the outcomes are different because of that.
Based on the way that AI was programmed, or
no? So what it's looking,
I mean, the thought there is it's not that was like a purposeful intent of the AI.
And it
in
never.
fact, I assume they're trying to not do that with AI.
So it never was intentional, but what that AI was, in that specific instance, what that AI was.
Because I just know the conspiracy theory people will go right there with it.
What the AI was told to do is go find all the similarities, all the like viable parameters for successful students.
Right.
One of the very top ones is...
Yes, based on the data set from...
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so given a factual data set. Now one of the biases is, well, if you're going to be a successful student, you're probably white.
Right.
And we're like, whoa!
Right.
And so here's the other weird thing. To train that out of AI is also a bias, right?
Right.
So you're just countering, and hopefully you get to zero, but good luck with that. And so in our case, none of those elements are there in that, in that circuit. I guess if the conspiracy theorist was to say something about us, if a news outlet had proven to be successful over time, we would show them to, we would bias them to be continually successful.
Right. They're always going to backstep it and connect the dots. Yes.
So if news outlets have always been successful, we will assume that they will continue to be successful. If they have not been successful, we will assume that they have not. Right. So it's just a continuation of that line. And that's where we actually get into reputation management for news outlets and authors and stuff is that element.
How are you involved on the AI side of it?
So I'm not a technologist. All this thing aside, like I build tech in Excel spreadsheets. It's very strange, but I have a brilliant programmer that we're so thrilled to have him as part of his name's Mike Ray, shout out to him. And he's been fantastic in taking my big, lofty, weird, ambitious ideas and turning them into code. And it's a really fun process for us because we work in these digital mediums. I've only met him face to face once because we're in the middle of a pandemic, and he lives not too far from me. Yeah. But I'll show him something and be like, well, hang on, I can do this. And he'll show it to me. I was like, whoa, we could do this. It just snowballs into some really interesting things. So one of our big ambitions, and we're probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years away from this, is to being able to a degree of percentage, identify words on a page. So words on a page being like, here's a pen and paper, write whatever you're feeling, and we can analyze those words on a page to a degree of accuracy of truth.
Wow.
And there's some really interesting things that we have to do to get to that point.
Right.
But we know what they are, and we've solved for them, and that's what we're working on. So.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's like so good. That's like amazing. You talked about real time earlier. I mean, what do you mean by real time? I mean, when as soon as something.
A few seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're already moving that quick with.
Yeah. Yeah, because so what we're looking for, we already know about the news outlet.
Right.
So right now we have 400 news outlets that are, we call them verified, where we've already done the homework.
Right.
There's some things that we can do. We want to grade 19. There's 19,000 websites that we have in our queue. That's way too many for me to do manually, and that's where we use the AI, right? So we tell the AI, go find these variables, just go find them. Right. We tell them where to go find them, and it takes what would be months and months of manual labor for myself or for somebody else, and the AI can do it in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of APIs, and it's a lot of just tying things together. There's some technical stuff there. So we want to get to 19,000 outlets. Once we know everything about those outlets, within a day or two's worth of, right, their metadata doesn't change that frequently, and it could be a week old and it's still pretty viable. And then the same with the author, right? So if I know that John Doe wrote this article and it appears on Jim Bob's website,
right.
I know everything about Jim Bob's website, and I can know a lot about John Doe pretty quickly. So we measure those two things, the outlet and the author, and then we look at the content and what's actually in the content. Like, are they using appropriate hyperlinks? What are they linking to in their hyperlinks? Do they have video attached? Do they have images attached? Are the images original? Mm-hmm. So sometimes they can just steal another image off the website and use it someplace else.
Right.
Some of the future tense elements are like, is the website ADA compliant? That's a thing.
What does that mean?
American Disabilities Act.
Okay.
So that's starting to apply to digital assets as well, because if you're blind, you have a right to understand what's on a web page. So they use speech recognition text to tell you,
gotcha.
Text-to-speech recognition to tell you what's on the site. And so that means that the site has to be formatted a specific way for that process to work. And there are laws for this, actually. I'm not just pulling this out of nothing. But again, we're looking for legitimacy. Legitimate news outlets are ADA compliant. Mm-hmm. Jim Bob's website from Moscow is not. Right. So it becomes a simple proxy for us to kind of connect those dots if we're really trying to, like, no fake news,
right?
Real legitimate news.
Right.
So one thing you probably haven't heard me say is I don't actually care what's in the news.
Right. Yeah.
It's just how responsible are the people that are in charge of creating it. How responsible are they?
Are you guys partnering with? I mean, how are you partnering with people on this?
A little bit. So we have a lot of relationships. We were. This isn't really a partnership, but we were the only finalist for South by Southwest for 2020 in Arizona.
Which is?
So South by Southwest is a huge tech and entertainment conference in Austin, Texas every year. They've been around for 36 years. And this was the first time they ever had to cancel it. They canceled it 6 days prior. Right. We were super bummed. So they chose 50 companies from around the world to come and present in front of tens of thousands of people.
Because you guys still are funding, and you're still, I mean, where are you guys along?
We are essentially bootstrapped. We have no institutional outside investors at this point.
Okay.
If anyone listening to this is not a public solicitation of funds, but
yes.
We would love to talk to you.
Yeah.
Just get your input.
And again, we'll share your links and make sure that people
that'd be great.
Connect with you. I think it's such an important.
We did get a grant from the City College of New York. As part of the Craig Newmark News Integrity Initiative. Thrilled. I mean, it's great people out there, and they've kind of helped us navigate some of this. And then we've got some relationships with Walter Cronkite ASU School of Journalism. We have our manager of content is actually employed there, and she's getting her master's in journalism. Krista, she's fantastic. Love working with her. So we've got, and then we've got a relationship with Newhouse, Syracuse University. So we've got a couple of education schools that we're working with, and we hope to be to broaden that to 10 schools before the end of the year. COVID definitely puts a damper on that, but it's still doable to be in 10 schools.
You mentioned COVID, and like I said, we're in this era, a very big thing that's affecting everybody, affecting the world in so many ways. And kind of an interesting subject, because information is coming out and changing on a daily basis right now with that. How have you guys been able to navigate that?
It's
I mean, I know for me, I mean, I'm a doctor, so my patients are looking to me, they're asking me questions. I'm doing my best to keep up.
Yep.
It's and I come from a family of, my father's a PhD in science. My parents are scientists, so I was taught to critically think and hopefully taught to critically think and look at good data. And it's so, this specific situation is such a prime example of how hard it is to navigate, even for me. And I'm not trying to pretend like I'm some brilliant person at this, but whatever, it's so challenging.
It really is. It's and I can't fault anybody for getting it wrong. I mean,
it also is an example of we have to also be okay at times that people are going to get it wrong. And how do we handle that when somebody gets it wrong? And how do that person, because right now people get things wrong and a lot of times they just don't even want to own up to it. And they don't want to own up to it because there's an awful penalty right now in our culture for making one mistake. Well, that means everything you said is BS or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's been an interesting learning experience for us. And what it's really allowed us to do is kind of calibrate our methodology. And so what we do is we'll take very specific news stories and we'll look at how they progress. And then hindsight being 2020, we can kind of analyze them after the fact. And so we can look at how our system scores them. We do this pretty regularly where we'll take a news story and then we'll subjectively, with our own biases, we'll kind of pass it around the room. Like, how would you grade this? And, we get all sorts of scores because we're asking all sorts of people to grade the same thing. And then, kind of do some back of the napkin math and be like, all right, we make this one a 78. And then we run it through our, big old fancy hooey, and it comes out 76. We're like, it's pretty good, right? Like we're kind of right on. And if you do that consistently and, with a couple of weeks of hindsight, looking at like, well, they said this 2 weeks ago and now they're changing. Would that have influenced? And we go back and we're like, actually, it's still pretty, within a few degrees, right? And because, human.
Because I could easily see you could find our article a month ago that probably graded high, and now you look at it and be like, well, we know this is like half of this isn't true anymore.
It's ironic you mentioned that. That's actually one of our variables is it graded within a certain amount of time of its publication. Because one of the things that we found is that if you're taking information that's perishable, right, it's no longer valid, it doesn't rank well. So we actually make sure that it does get graded within a certain amount of time, and we measure for that of its creation, of its publication date, for that very reason. So see, you want a job?
No, I don't. Too much on my plate already. Where do you think? I'm just kind of you're kind of a visionary and things like that. Where do you kind of think some of this stuff is just going? Where do you see us 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What are your hopes, at least, and what do you think we need to be? We're talking about some of the things we need to be. But
10 years from now, Musk is going to take me to Mars. That's where I'm going. So
I don't think we're going to escape any of this going to Mars, though.
We have. We like to think about the big picture because it's kind of the map, right? It helps kind of guide us in that direction. And the only reason I even bring it up is you can get lost for the forest from the trees, right? We like to think about it, but it doesn't really influence our day-to-day operations because what's more influential for like what we do today is what is impacting people and what do they want and what solutions can we give to people's problems. That's much more important. That being said, there's two big things that we picture in our long roadmap. One is what we call a DApp, or a decentralized application, which involves blockchain, which you and I briefly mentioned. And it's a much bigger conversation that requires a higher level understanding of a lot of moving parts. But the nuts and bolts, the baseline implication of that is we can provide an independent news source with verified information. Like I said, we can look at words on a page for places like China, North Korea, Iran, Vietnam. Roughly half the planet doesn't have access to free press. what are the implications of changing that metric? I don't even know.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you what it would mean for the world to give those places a free press. And we have answers for how to get there.
Right.
Will they work? We think so, but again, there's a lot of moving parts. The other thing that's really fun to think about is because the system just looks at data points, we can datafy just about anything. And we're working on systems that will verify people. That sounds kind of Big Brother-ish. All of this is opt-in. I'm not going to go around telling people,
right,
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But there's a huge problem with social media, specifically LinkedIn. 25% of LinkedIn profiles are fake. And you can go
You said 25%?
25%.
Holy crap.
And on top of that, you can say anything you want on LinkedIn. I could go on and say I went to Harvard and got a master's in molecular biology, and there's nothing stopping me from doing that. And that
and there's nothing in place right now to
nope.
Okay.
And so there's nothing that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it, so I'm not getting weird emails. Hey, take this off your LinkedIn page.
I had no idea, and that's a huge problem. I mean, especially in the professional world. I mean, LinkedIn's like the.
Yep. It's a huge deal. Huge problem.
I mean, as far as I know, like reliable. Never thought about it, but yeah, that's crazy.
So that was actually the problem that I set off to fix when I stumbled across fixing fake news. That was the primary, this is really bad. And then I realized I could, with the same methodology of fixing that problem, I could apply it to fake news, and that just seemed more like, that's a bigger problem. We're going to go do that. Yeah. And so in terms of verifying people, basically all that is, social networks already have verified profiles, right? You can go on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and you can see that this is Neil deGrasse Tyson's Twitter account. Like, great. But imagine that for everybody, right? So that every tweet you saw was either verified or not verified, with a much higher degree of this is a verified tweet.
Yeah.
All over the place. Again, we're using that same mechanism of verifying the provenance of entities, of people, so that their word is just worth more, right? And now it's more valuable. So for the people that can fit into that bucket and want that value to be there, like, I'm a legitimate person with legitimate ideas, and I want them to be legitimized, that's a really valuable proposition. So what that kind of looks like is a verified social network, so to speak.
Right.
But news is at the core of it.
Yeah. So that's kind of like next level. You guys will be.
We're not that far away from that. We're maybe 3 months, 2-3 months from that.
Awesome.
So, but then we have to figure, we're just building the infrastructure. We actually have to figure out how it works once we get it there. So.
Well, I want to thank you. I mean, this is like such a great conversation, and these are such important things for us to be working on, finding solutions to. Moving the world in a better place, and I think I appreciate you, and I think it's great what you guys are doing.
Of course.
Good luck with it all.
Thank you so much for having me. I would normally shake your hand, but
yes, I know. We were talking about we'll bow or do whatever we're gonna do. But yeah, we'll see you soon, and next time we'll talk about some of this blockchain stuff.
Absolutely,
anytime. I'm totally clueless about, so it'll be fun.
We'll do it next week.
Have a good one.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks.
you.